optimal minimal.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start to shake.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite? I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
Tim Ferriss Show.
Thank you for supporting the sponsors of this show, 99 Designs, which is your one-stop shop for all things graphic design related. Go to 99designs.com/Tim to see the projects that I've put up, including the mock-ups and drafts of the book cover for the 4-Hour Body. Ex Officio and I go way back. exofficio.com/Tim. You can see the clothing that I've used for traveling through 20 plus countries, including the underwear. By the way, that's about half of my underwear drawer right now. exofficio.com/Tim. You can also see the viral video that I put out, which shows you how to travel the world with 10 pounds or less. As always, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, and you can find all of the links and resources from this episode, as well as every other episode, by going to 4hourworkweek.com/podcast. Spell it all out, or you can go to 4hourworkweek.com and just click on podcast. Feedback, if you have feedback, I would love your thoughts, anything at all, who you'd like to see on this show. Ping me on Twitter at tferriss, that's twitter.com/TFERRISS, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Tim Ferriss with 2 R's and 2 S's. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tim Ferriss again. The Tim Ferriss Show. For those of you who are new to the show, this is where I try to dissect excellence, whether that is a billionaire investor, a chess prodigy, an entrepreneur, or otherwise. How do they do what they do? What are the tools and tricks and tactics that they use that you can use as well? And in this episode, I try to dissect the mind of Nick Ganju, who I've known for a very, very long time, since graduating from college, basically. He is the CTO of ZocDoc and has raised more than $95 million in venture capital as of June 2003 or so, and they have more than 6 million users per month. And although Nick would hate for me to describe it this way, imagine OpenTable for doctors, although it fixes much more than that, many other broken aspects of quality healthcare. And in this episode, we geek out on math, which I'm phobic of. I've had a lifetime fear of mathematics. So we geek out on how to tackle numeracy if you're not comfortable with math, poker, ping pong, how to write a hit song, and the philosophical implications of Monsters, Inc., one of my favorite movies, certainly, among many other things. It is not too dense. That's the whole idea, to try to demystify and disarm things that are intimidating. And Nick has just an incredible capacity for simplifying what appears to be the very, very difficult. So I had a blast with this. I hope you do as well. So please meet Nick Ganju. Hello, everybody. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another episode and edition of the Tim Ferriss Show. Today is a rare treat because I have an old friend of mine who's got all sorts of dirt on me and knows all the skeletons in the closet. Nick Ganju. Nick, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And you're in New York City at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Manhattan.
So the beginning, I suppose, goes back some ways. We initially met. It must have been in 2000. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you were looking for an apartment, and I had an extra bedroom that I was renting out. And
if I remember correctly, I didn't make the cut. This was at the height of the .com boom at a point where I suppose it was right at the top of the roller coaster in a lot of ways. And housing was just next to impossible, not unlike what it's like right now. And I guess it must have been Craigslist, Casual Encounters, or I'm kidding, the rental section. And we met up and didn't end up becoming roommates, but ended up becoming friends and playing a lot of pool. And it was amusing to me to read your official bio for the first time yesterday to try to get some additional context. So you ended up being the Bay Area billiards champion. Is this right?
Yeah. It was like one of those leagues that you join, and I ended up being the champion that year. I played a lot of pool in college, and then since we were both just out of college, I I had, still retained all that skill. If you played me right now, I'd probably be really rusty.
And we're going to dig into some of the other very varied, eclectic sort of Dos Equis skills that you got that you seem to have, like table tennis, and sort of deconstruct why that is. Also get into the music, but for those people who aren't familiar with you, we can certainly get into the professional stuff. But where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Maybe you can give us some background.
Sure. I grew up in Chicago, in the west suburbs of Chicago. My parents were both doctors, so nice, comfortable sort of upbringing. I was very fortunate in that way. Went to undergrad, majored in computer science, finished in 1998, worked in Austin, Texas at a company called Trilogy for a year, but then decided that the .com boom of the time was just way too hot for me to be working at a larger company. So, like all the gold hunters of history, I moved out west to California. For the gold rush of 1999, I guess you could call it. And tried my luck at a couple startups there.
And you ended up then, I suppose, bringing us to the current day, co-founding ZocDoc. What is the current state of ZocDoc? How many employees do you have? Maybe you can give us some stats.
Yeah, sure. We are currently about 500 to 600 employees, and over 6 million people visit ZocDoc each month to search for a doctor. And to give a little background, ZocDoc is a site where you can search for a doctor, and you can see reviews, you can see photos, and you can book an appointment right online. So in the way that you can book everything else online these days, we're trying to bring doctor appointment booking online.
Now, for those people who haven't used the site, would it be fair to just, as an imperfect analogy, say that it's similar to, it's a more refined open table plus a bunch of other extra benefits for doctors, that it has that sort of ease of use or more?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly it has that open table aspect where you can book appointments online. Of course, it also has the Yelp aspect where you can see reviews and you can see photos. And you can also now check in, which means you can fill out your medical history forms online before you get to the doctor's office. So that medical form is now pre-filled, and as you visit subsequent doctors, you don't have to refill a medical form. So we're slowly adding more and more features that make that process as painless as possible.
So one of the topics that I wanted to talk about comes to mind when I call to my memory the first visit to the ZocDoc offices, and we've spent a lot of time together. We've had plenty of wine together, played a lot of pool together, and I've always been fascinated by your ability to not just test assumptions, but also cut through a lot of the fuzzy thinking to hard numbers and analytics. And the displays that you had at ZocDoc, the real-time displays of numbers and metrics, I think were a great sort of external representation for me of your mind. And many people probably do not know that one of the reasons I chose to go to Princeton undergrad, which, by the way, those people who are listening who might be applying to colleges, I was told by my guidance counselor I would not get into. Talk about encouragement. And I think this is actually going to be relevant to our conversation later. You have to look at incentives because economics ultimately is the study of incentives and how people respond to them. And what guidance counselors, even at very good schools, want to be able to say is 90% of my students got into their first choice. The easiest way to do that is to make sure that their first choices are mediocre.
Sure.
But one of the draws for Princeton was it was one of the few schools in the top group I was considering that did not have a math requirement. And I had a horrible experience in 10th grade with a math teacher. And this might seem strange to folks, but she was a female math teacher who I think had just been really put through the ringer to get to where she was. And she was really, really kind of belligerent towards a handful of boys in the class. And it turned me off to math completely from that point forward. In contrast, my brother had the exact opposite experience in 10th grade, had a wonderful teacher, and he went on to major in math and pursue a PhD in statistics. So I'd be curious to hear sort of the origins of your interest in computer science and also sort of your general thinking on these types of skills. I know that's broad, but a lot of people like myself feared that it's something innate. It's completely innate. You either have it or you don't. So maybe you could sort of rewind the clock and talk about your experience with getting comfortable with this type of thing.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the computer science, I started the way that many computer nerds start, which is I started programming at an early age, like 9 or 10 years old, on my Apple IIc, and just trying to make games. Right, like we had those games. We had the Atari 2600, and I had some simple games on my Apple. And I was like, I want to try to do this. So I bought a book on basic programming, and tried to make a couple games. I tried to reproduce the game from War Games, that, if you remember that movie.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah, with Matt Broderick. So I tried to reconstruct that game, which the game in that movie is called Global Thermonuclear War, and so it's a pretty violent game. And I tried to recreate it with my 9-year-old brain, trying to deconstruct where to deploy nuclear missiles. And I was actually working on it at school, in grade school, and my principal walked into the computer lab, and I got in big trouble because I was making a game called Global Thermonuclear War in 4th grade. And so but that was the genesis of my interest. And then in high school we had these programmable calculators. And I started writing games on the calculator and giving it to all my friends, in the way that misguided nerds are. Mm-hmm. At age 15, I thought I would get a lot of girls this way. And it turns out that writing, Tetris on your calculator does not actually win you the cheerleaders. But that was my best strategy at that time. Suffice to say, I was single for high school. But then, and so my guidance counselor kind of saw these kind of things too, and recommended to me that I go and major in computer engineering or computer science. And that was something that was not even really apparent to me, that was a whole major and stuff. And of course, this is in the 90s, and you couldn't just Google things. And so it's just information. It was almost like a revelation to me that you could just go and do this as a profession. Mm-hmm. And there's actually formal training. Like, you can actually go to a 4-year college and get a computer science degree. Mm-hmm. So that was great. And so I went to University of Illinois, which is like sort of a top 5 computer science school. It kind of flirts in and out of there. Some years it's number 4, and some years it's number 7 or whatever.
That's top tier. That's didn't Mark Andreessen develop Mosaic there? Or
yeah. Andreessen is from there. Max Levchin from PayPal is from there. So a bunch of sort of illustrious current, Silicon Valley moguls are from there. So it's a good school. And I certainly really, really fell in love with computer science when I did those 4 years, and kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do as a profession.
What made you fall in love with it there, and what do you think makes it what makes it a top 5 program, aside from maybe the selection bias and having really good applicants over time start to select it?
Yeah, and certainly that's certainly every school has that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy when you start to get that you gain traction and all the best kids want to go to your school. But I think that they are very vigilant about keeping the computer science curriculum current. And so you can see, and I had a couple friends that had gone to different schools at that time, and also majored in computer science. And I was learning Java at the time, which was the hot new thing. This is like 1996 or something, and we already had courses in Java, and my friends were still learning stuff in C. And so I think that the new schools the best schools are very diligent about keeping the curriculum up to date, especially in computer science. As we all know, the industry and the technology has changed so quickly.
Mm-hmm. And in a world where that's changing so quickly, I think this is part of what's so intimidating to a lot of folks, whether they're just trying to get by and want to be employable, or they are hoping to invest in technology companies, which is a very dangerous game to play, I think, for a lot of reasons. But how much past a certain point, because I recognize, for instance, it's easy for me to look at learning natural languages, mm-hmm. which I assumed I was bad at learning up until 15 or 16. And I can destroy a lot of myths and old wives' tales about that. So when someone says to me, oh my God, I'm too old to learn a language, it would take me my entire lifetime, it takes decades to become fluent, blah, blah, blah. I can very easily dismantle those and get people excited about learning a language, even if they're, 30, 40, whatever it might be. With computer science and math, I have a lot of insecurities, and I can do very basic stuff, but never to calculus, got up to pre-cal. And how coachable are these things, and how valuable is it to try to become more comfortable with sort of the quantified side of life? At a later point, right? I just turned 37. It's one of these things that dogs me as an insecurity, much in the way that not being able to swim dogged me until I was 30. Yeah. But maybe you could comment on that.
Sure. I think, there's certain fields of math that are extremely important and just become more and more relevant every day. And you see like this kind of, like the big data sort of, I hate to use buzzwords, but that, that sort of trend that is, has come into favor in the last few years, which is a very real thing, despite the buzzwords. There's a lot of sort of information to be gleaned and improvements in our society to be had from statistical analysis. So, statistics and probability and statistics are things that are just going to become bigger and bigger parts of our world. In terms of calculus, I think if anything, calculus is sort of diminishing because that sort of field of math was more applicable when you didn't have a giant computer on every desktop, mm-hmm. Giant in terms of processing power, mm-hmm. To crunch the crap out of numbers, and a lot of things that were I'm trying to make it like layman's. A lot of things that were closed form solutions, which means, they got solved through these sort of complex equations, mm-hmm. That you see with, lots of weird symbols in them. Now computers can just sort of brute force crank out the answers to them. Mm-hmm. And in a better way too, because it's sort of, you can more closely mirror reality, with a computer mm-hmm. than you can with a closed form solution like a calculus equation. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think, it's not a big deal if most people don't know calculus, but there's fields of math which are certainly helpful in understanding.
What would those areas be? And I suppose just to jump right into it, if you were, and this conversation is inspired for those people listening, partially because we sat down at the ZocDoc offices to talk about encryption, and I remember I'd become really fascinated by encryption and ciphers and code breaking because of a science fiction, I suppose you could call it a science fiction book called Cryptonomicon. And so we started talking about encryption, and you got up and walked me through the basic principles of encryption, and feel free to correct me or provide some details if I'm missing them, but as it applies in a lot of computer science. Then we went out to dinner that night and sat down with a bunch of really impressive CTOs and guys who've been VPs of engineering, and we talked about encryption, and it just blew my mind that something that I felt so utterly out of my depth with, a few hours earlier, I was able to actually cogently listen to discourse about in a few hours. And that really encouraged me, but it's been hard for me to determine how do I walk out. And I mean, I know you're a good friend of mine, but you're also busy. So it's like, I don't want you to be my pro bono, like mental model mentor. So how should somebody in a fun or interesting way to develop some of these skills, right? Because you look at, I remember this, and this is such a simple thing, but it kind of blew my mind when the probabilities. All right, if we look at probabilities, humans are so bad, sort of intrinsically, it seems, at working with probabilities. And if you have, let's say, if you have a big party and people bump into each other and they have the same birthday party, birthday date, they're sort of astonished, right? They're like, "Oh my God, what are the chances?" It's like 1 in a million. And I'm just looking at this description here on Wikipedia of the birthday problem or the birthday paradox.
Sure.
And the probability obviously reaches 100 when the number of people reaches 367, because there are whatever we extrapolate from 365 days a year, but you get to 50% probability with just 23 people. And it's so hard for people to grasp that. So,
well, let me refine it a little bit to just state it really precisely. It's not that, one of those 23 people, could go and ask the other 22 and odds are would find the same birthday, right? It's that any two of those 23 people have the same birthday. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's a little bit different, but it actually, I think that's where the misconception comes in, is that, you can kind of take from it like, wow, if I walked around and asked 22 people, like there's a 50% chance that I'd have the same birthday as one of them, which is not the right way to think about it.
Right. And the devil's in the details, right? With those subtleties. I mean, massive miscalculations, even by very smart, experienced people, right? You look at something like long-term capital management, right? They build this massively sophisticated system that doesn't take into account that somebody else could have a similar machine that would then sort of trigger this crazy back and forth that would end in catastrophe, right? So, if somebody feels as I do, right, that they want to be more comfortable with this type of thing, but they're not, are there any particular approaches or books or anything like that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think that people get intimidated because they sort of look online, and Wikipedia especially does this. You go and you're like, what is expected value or something? And you look at it, and Wikipedia immediately like gives you these Greek symbols. On the first, and everyone's seen that, right? Like the first paragraph.
It's in the first line of the birthday problem.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and that serves that even intimidates me. And I think I know a fair bit about math. But like, the best way to do it is to just start really simple and then work your way up slowly. And so, when you want to talk about probability, like, let's play a game, you and me, right? Let's play a game where we roll a die, a 6-sided die, right? And if the number becomes 6, if the number is 6, I pay you $1. And the number is 1 through 5, you pay me $1, right? Now, would you play that game?
No, I would not play that game.
Right, so you wouldn't play that game, and so it's intuition, right? Now let's change the game and say that if a 6 comes up, I pay you $1,000, and if 1 through 5 each come up, you have to pay me $1.
Yes, I'll play that game.
Right, so you play that game, right? So now the question is, at what point should you play or play it not, or not play it, right? Would you play it at $3? Like,
it's very Shakespearean. No, play it not. Yes.
To play or not to play. If the 6 was $3, if I paid you $3 when a 6 showed up, would you play that game?
Right. Probably not. I have to start doing calculations here.
Sure, but that's the genesis of it, right? The genesis of it is, right, the genesis of all math really is starting from these common sense or these real world problems and saying, okay, well, how do I understand this problem? My intuition says I wouldn't play it if I only won $1 when I hit 6, and I would play it if I won $1,000 when I played 6. Would I do it at $10? Would I do it at $3? Start from there, and we can walk through this problem, right? A simple way to think about this problem is, let's assume in 6 rolls you get 1 of each, right? Like, let's say we roll it 6 times and you get 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4 1 5 and 1 6, right? So for the $3, it's right, you would lose $5 for each of 1 through 5, right? And then you would win $3 when you rolled a 6, right? So you would make $3 and you would lose $5, so you'd be at negative $2.
Negative $2. Yep.
Right. And so so you can start to see at which point you would break even, which is 5. I'll cheat and give you the answer. But at $5 you would break even exactly, right? If I paid you $5 every time a 6 showed up,
right,
then you would lose $5 for each of the other rolls, and then you would win $5 when you got the 6.
I'm tracking you. I'm tracking you so far. I'm not as dumb as I look. Actually, I'm a bit dumber than I look, but that's a different story.
And so, right, but then that's the genesis of it, right? So now let's roll 2 die, right? And like, what are the odds of getting 2 6s? Right. So the odds are that each one has a 1 in 6 chance of getting a 6. Each die has a 1 in 6 chance of getting a 6, and you multiply those together, and the odds of getting 2 6s are 1 in 36.
1 in 36. Yep.
Yeah. And so now, right? So now you could do the game again, right? Would I pay you? How much should I pay you if you get a 36? How much should I pay you if you get 2 6s? I should say, and it just goes from there, right? It just gets more and more complex. So, right, and then you're like blackjack. Then is just more of the same thing.
Yep.
Right. It's just a more complex version of the same thing. And so if you start simple and understand the conceptual underpinnings, and then just work your way up from there. I think that sort of every field of math can just be broken down that way. If you just start simple and not get intimidated by all these Greek symbols.
Now, the one of the things that sparked my interest in exploring some of this was my experience in television when I was filming the Tim Ferriss experiment, which the future of which is TBD for those people listening and wondering. It's the entire division at Turner that produced it was fired, basically shut down, and it's sitting on a shelf. So I've been battling to try to rescue that for months. Suffice to say, keep an eye out. I may need some public support to get that done. But the episodes included at one point going to Vegas and being trained by a really fascinating guy named Phil Gordon, who has a CS background, who's taken home millions of dollars in winnings as a professional poker player. And he had a week to train me to go heads up, one-on-one against professional poker players. And so you can imagine that week was a lot of this type of conversation.
Sure.
And he would ask me these very, very basic probability questions, and I would just have this like stoned Labrador Retriever response with no words coming out of my face, and he'd just be like, "You're kidding me, right?" But worked up to the point where he was able to give me matrices for deciding in a very binary way, like, do you fold or do you raise, right? And then I started memorizing these sets of rules. And it made it fun, right? It gave it a context so that I wasn't grappling with some of these questions in a vacuum. And I know one of the books you recommended to me was How to Measure Anything. And some of it I found very interesting. And of course, when we were not too long ago, sort of sitting in hanging out at the pool and brainstorming stuff like this and talking about investing, you were able to throw an extra element into the conversation, which was, well, if you have a 30% probability of doing X or 70% probability of doing Y, if the person giving you that information only tells the truth, 60% of the time, then what, right? Like, how does that affect the outcomes?
Right.
Are there any other books or even just games or methods for making this a fun process for people, right? Because the idea that I could spend a week learning poker and be able to play without getting my total face ripped off, probably 70% of the recreational players out there pretty easily is huge ROI, right? That's massive.
That's great.
What else comes to mind? What other books would you recommend to people or resources?
I love poker as well. I think poker is a great example of math, of a combination of math and like sort of emotional intelligence also coming into play. But poker is a great sort of reflection of all the stuff we've been talking about. Of course, the books. I've recently read a great book, which is called "How Not to Be Wrong: The Power of Mathematical Thinking," and this book by a guy named Jordan Ellenberg is is exactly what we're talking about. It's like it's written for an audience of people that have, historically been intimidated by math or just thought, gee, I'm not good at math, and introduces things in a very simple way and then works up to more complex concepts in the way that we just broke down, probability with this dice game. And so that's a great book, and I hope it does well, and I hope it alleviates some of this sort of, that intimidation that people have.
And does this? I know that we also chatted at one point about your classes. There might be a better term for them, but internally at ZocDoc, trying to help poor liberal arts majors like me become better at goal setting and things along those lines. So I know you're a fan of what is often referred to as SMART goals. Would you mind talking about how you set goals or how you suggest people set goals and common problems with or common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that the easiest example is that people so SMART goals means specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, and so it's sort of a framework to help you pick goals that you can objectively hit or miss. So measurable means I'm going to lose exactly 10 pounds or at least 10 pounds in the next 2 months or 3 months, and and then you can objectively decide at the end whether or not you've lost 10 pounds, right? As opposed to saying I'm just going to lose weight, and then you don't really know whether what kind of goal, and it doesn't work psychologically, right? You're just like, oh, I'm just sort of vaguely losing weight, and writing down that goal and literally putting it on your wall actually gives you something to strive towards. But then the next problem after that, so the first problem is just setting objective goals, right? Instead of just saying, let's try to accomplish X, right? Let's try to get X more, let's just try to get more people using ZocDoc, right? As opposed to let's get 10 million more people to use ZocDoc, are different goals, just psychologically speaking. And then, and then at review time, it's easy to see whether you did it or not. But then the next problem after that is that, people just say, yeah, that sounds like a good number. Let's get 1 million more people to use it or whatever. But there's no basis in how they're going to get to that million, right? And so, and the analogy I like to use is, when they tried to put the first man in space or the first man on the moon, they didn't just say like, okay, let's get in the rocket and like burn the rocket as hard as we can and maybe we'll get into space, right? Like they did all the math behind it, right? They were like, gravity pulls us this much, and we have to take this much weight up. And so then we need this much fuel, but this much fuel then adds this much weight also to the rocket. So so that causes its own set of problems. And then there's wind resistance and everything, right? And they did all the math to figure out how to get themselves into space. But I feel like in business and in life, people just say, I'm just gonna add this much, or I'm just gonna create this much more, X percent more of whatever is going to happen. And they haven't really done the underlying math, right?
I think I'm guilty of that too, definitely, because you're constantly told as a non-quant comfortable person, like, you got to think big, and so people are like, okay, great, like I'm going to build $1 billion company, and then you know what I mean?
Right, sure,
yeah.
So that's a good example, right? Like if you want to build $1 billion company, what do you need to do? Like, right, what kind of revenue do you need to justify, or what kind of earnings do you need to justify being $1 billion? And then, what sort of markets or what sort of opportunities are available that would create that much earnings, and then how are you going to get there, right? You can't just say like, let's just build $1 billion company. And so, I mean, it's good to have that goal, but then you need a plan to execute as well. And I think that, one of the big improvements that we've done operationally is what I call business cases, and it's the math of how you're going to get there, right? And the example I use, which was sort of just a fun example, was we use that Monsters Inc. So Monster is a recurring kind of theme at ZocDoc. So the monsters from Monsters Inc. I'm blanking on their names now, but those characters from that movie.
I want to call one of them Elmo, but it's not the right name.
It's Mike Wachowski or something. Man, I can't believe I'm blanking.
Sounds good enough.
It's Sully and Mike Wachowski or something. Anyway, right. So like any team member that crushes it that week, we give them one of the stuffed animals, and they're the monster of the week and stuff. So it's this sort of recurring theme. But my example that I used was they have these doors to children's bedrooms where they go and they like make them. They used to scare them, but now they make them laugh or whatever.
James P. Sullivan and Mike Wazowski.
Mike Wazowski. Yeah. That was pretty close.
That was close.
Yeah. So, so they go into these children's bedrooms and they make them laugh, and that generates electricity for the city that they live in, Monstropolis, which is the name of the city. Mm-hmm. And so, right, like, let's say, one day they're like short on electricity. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing, right, so then the CEO of Monstropolis or CEO of Monsters Inc. is like, let's generate more electricity. Mm-hmm. And then a bad way to do it would be like, let's just try to generate more, right? Mm-hmm. And a good way to do it would be like, let's generate 1 gigawatt more, mm-hmm. right? And then it's like, okay, 1 gigawatt, great. How do we get there, right? Mm-hmm. And then, well, okay, so each door generates, a megawatt. Each door that you manufacture to a new child's bedroom like generates 1 megawatt, mm-hmm. and so you need to generate 1,000 more doors. Like you need to like manufacture 1,000 more doors to get this 1 gigawatt. And then how do you make 1,000 more doors? Well, you need like 100 door manufacturers that each make 10. And then you try to do that, but then you realize there's like a 10% defect rate, right? And so it's like sort of building up from there, mm-hmm. And understanding the math behind it, mm-hmm. and then understanding if that's realistic. Can I have 100 door makers or whatever I just said? Is it realistic to hire that many that quickly in 1 month or whatever? But really breaking down the plan to and multiplying these numbers through to get to the goal is really the difference there between success and failure. Mm-hmm. And it's not complicated math, right? It's just I need 1,000 doors, so I need 100 door manufacturers that can each make 10 doors in a month, and then I'll have 1,000 doors. And so none of it's calculus or any of this other stuff. But it is, rigorous in terms of, you have to be able to when you break it down to the individual components, those things have to be executable, right? Can I actually get 100 door makers, and does each of them actually make 10 doors a month, and et cetera?
Mm-hmm. And how do you then translate that to, say, weekly check-ins or monthly check-ins? How do people who do this case study, mm-hmm. Who've set a quantifiable, objectively measurable goal, right. Then ensure that they're on track, or at least check in to see if they're on track or not? How frequently is that done? And how do people improve the odds of hitting those goals once they've set it down on paper and taken, say, a sort of they've accepted and agreed that yes, we need to understand sort of the different numbers that underpin this goal and the assumptions we're making. How do you encourage them to keep on track? How often are they checking in or having someone else check in on them? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. So the goals are set quarterly. So every 3 months they have, they set this goal. So for going back to this Monsters Inc. example, that would be a 3-month goal would be the, we're going to generate one extra gigawatt of power. And then they have to, right. And then each week they're going to follow the numbers that were the breakdown of this plan. So they say, how many door manufacturers did I actually hire this week, and mm-hmm. how many doors did they actually manufacture this week? Right. And then you start to get confidence around those numbers, right? You start to see, oh crap, I can't hire 100 door makers in a month. It's actually going to take me 2-3 months to hire 100, mm-hmm. but I can hire 30 in the first month, and they're each going to contribute 10 doors. So I'll at least have 300 doors in the first month or whatever, mm-hmm. right? And then you learn something new. You learn that 10% of the doors are defective. Mm-hmm. So it's actually not 300 doors generated in the first month. It's 270 doors generated in the first month. Mm-hmm. And so then you add a new line in your business case here that is going to subtract 10% from your finished product of doors. Mm-hmm. And over time you generate a really solid understanding of that game, of whichever initiative it is that you're planning.
Mm-hmm.
as you add lines and as you refine the numbers for each line, and then so basically you start to fill in the actuals and you look at their deviation from your projections when you started.
Yeah, from your base assumptions, which is something that I'm constantly astonished, and I do this in a very Fred Flintstone sort of knuckle dragging kind of way. But if I look at just as a group, for instance, investors, angel investors, or people who are doing early stage investments,
right.
They form a thesis, they go out and raise a bunch of money, and then they never modify.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the parody of George W. Bush that Stephen Colbert did at one point, where he gave an address at like the Republican National Convention or something, and he said, this is a paraphrase obviously, but he's like, I stand behind a president who, no matter what happens on Wednesday, he still holds the same belief on Thursday that he did on Tuesday.
He was making fun of because they branded John Kerry as a flip flopper.
Yeah, right.
That's what it was, and it's like it's sort of the mark of intelligence to learn from your mistakes and change your attitudes of things. And so they were sort of Colbert was ribbing. Yeah. Bush for branding Kerry as a flip flopper.
Yeah, I'm not sure that worked out exactly as they expected. But So when you were a kid, just to really not entirely shift gears because it's closely related. Actually, before I go there, do you have all of your employees trained on Excel? Is that what that means when they're inputting these values so that things automatically update?
Yeah, this is done in Excel. Each column is a month, and so you can see time progressing. Going to the right. And then each row will be one of these things. So again, with the Monsters Inc., it's how many door manufacturers I have, how many do they make in a month, what's the defect rate, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then as a month turns into reality, you overwrite the projected assumptions with the actuals. But what I think in general, what I'm saying sounds really simple. But people don't do it. People just don't do it.
Yeah.
In general, in lots of companies that I've visited, or like you said, like smaller startups that I help out with, in an advisory role, they just don't do these things. And if you think about the number of projects that fail in business, and then the amount of research or forethought that goes into them, in general, that's way off, right? Mm-hmm. And to go back to probability, if there's even if you think there's a 90% chance of something succeeding and a 10% chance of failing, well, then it's worth it to spend 10% of the time ahead of time to see if it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is if you're starting a 10-week project, you spend a week to research it, right? And people don't do that, right? People
not at all.
spend 2 hours thinking about it, and they go, "That'd be a great idea," and then they hop off and do it for 10 weeks. Right. And
just to put that in perspective, that means if it's a 10-year project, that you could justify a year, in doing due diligence, which is totally entirely not the case, obviously, in the vast majority of instances.
Or budget, right? If it's a $100 million project, you should spend $10 million just researching it. Mm-hmm. If you think there's a 10% chance it's going to fail, and more than 10% of projects actually fail, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think there's a 25% chance that it fails, you should spend $25 million researching a $100 million project. This is assuming that you're going to take the research project is going to take the odds of success to 100%. Mm-hmm. But still, it's and in the perfect, it's not a perfect world and nobody knows these exact numbers, but certainly the amount of forethought or research that's done in general is way under what even a ballpark estimate would say that the amount of forethought should go into it.
Mm-hmm. Do you hire people who have pre-existing Excel experience? I do not, for instance. I mean, I can read an Excel document, but if I have to create macros and so on, I couldn't create an Excel spreadsheet that functions to save my life. How do you train someone to? Do you do it all internally? Do you have a certain course you recommend? Anything like that?
We do. Yeah, we do it all internally, and then again, macros are just way ahead of anything we're doing. Right? Just getting a standard Excel sheet working just just let's call it 10 rows and 10 columns is fine. And then, and you can build up from there as you learn more and you get more comfortable. But, again, this is going back to that attitude again, saying like, I can't do macros and I can't do like VLOOKUPs and I can't do pivot tables.
I can't do those either.
But basic Excel is none of that. Basic Excel is I have, it's just that. It's I have 10 door manufacturers or whatever, 100 door manufacturers that are making 10 doors, and you multiply those two cells together and you get 1,000. Yep. And that's how you should start, right? You should start with just the one row. So like, let's start with just the one row of like, I'm going to make 1,000 doors. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like literally one cell that says 1,000. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, well, what's the math behind that? And so then you say, okay, well, I need 100 manufacturers that are each going to make 10 doors. Mm-hmm. So you make 2 new cells and you say, you put 100 in one cell and 10 in the other cell. And then the third cell that used to just say 1,000 is now, you change that to be the product of those other 2 cells. Mm-hmm. Right? So you say that third cell equals the first cell times the second cell.
Right.
And then, so now if you change the numbers in the, in the number of door manufacturers you have, the 1,000 will automatically shift. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you say, okay, well, why do I have this many door manufacturers? Why do I think I have 100 door manufacturers? And it's like, oh, because I'm going to hire 50 this month and 50 next month. Mm-hmm. And so, right. So now that 100, instead of just being 100 is the sum of 2 other cells that each say 50. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you just work backwards from there. You just take each cell and break it down into its subcomponents. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon you have a working Excel document, and it doesn't need to be more complex than that. And that's right. And that's a great start. And you'll do that for a while, and then you'll be comfortable with that. And then you'll be like, what is this pivot table nonsense that everyone's talking about? And is it actually useful? Mm-hmm. And then you'll go into pivot tables but nobody in the history of Excel, no matter what kind of computer genius they were, like started day one and was like, how do I make macros work? Or how do I make pivot tables work? Right. They all started this way. It's just the Excel. And, I think that's like the big sort of, secret of mathematicians in general is that everybody started from 1 + 1 = 2 and built their way up. Mm-hmm. And it's just each step is not a big step once you understand the previous step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a gentleman, I believe his name is Keith Devlin out of Stanford, who's very good at speaking to this topic. And I always find myself sort of nodding and agreeing with him after every essay I read or interview I hear. And then once I sort of look at the possibility of delving into numbers, then I get cold sweats, which I need to get over. Let me change gears just a little bit and
Sure.
ask, sort of fill in the picture of who Nick Ganju is. The first is, do you have a favorite book or a book that you've given most as a gift?
Yeah, I mean, it depends in which context. So
you could give a couple.
Sure. So for my software engineers, I love a book called Don't Make Me Think, mm-hmm. which is a book about usability and making software and user interfaces that are friendly to people. And often you see these software engineers where they kind of scoff, and everyone's encountered this guy. It's an IT guy or a software engineer that scoffs at the novice user, right? Mm-hmm. They say, ha ha ha, this guy doesn't know how to use this thing. Like, this guy doesn't know how to use Photoshop, he's so dumb, or he doesn't know how to make his network. He doesn't know how to connect his computer to the network, and he's so dumb. And right, that attitude is something that needs to vanish. And if you look at successful companies like Apple, where things just work, none of the engineers have that attitude, right? Mm-hmm. They have the attitude of, a bad software company has the attitude of, if somebody doesn't know how to use something, it's their fault because that user is dumb. Mm-hmm. And then a good software company has the attitude of, if they don't know how to use something, it's our fault because we did not make the software intuitive enough, mm-hmm. right? And we didn't make it simple enough for people to use. Mm-hmm. And you see Apple is a shining example of that, where they really go out of their way and do extra work. The engineers do immense amounts of extra work to make it easy and simple for the user, and they're rewarded in the market. And so the book that I love, which helps reinforce that sort of culture, that user friendly culture here at ZocDoc, is a book called Don't Make Me Think, which is a book on usability, and it's sort of a simple book. It's like 100 to 150 pages, lots of illustrations about like good user interfaces and bad user interfaces, and it's kind of an easy read, but it is a treatise on why we should make usable interfaces, and not just how we should make them, like what sort of user interface sort of patterns work or don't work, but also why we should do that.
Right.
And this is the reason, right? Like, I mean, think about ZocDoc, right? If you go to the homepage, people discovering us for the first time, they go to the homepage, and if it's complicated, they're just going to leave.
Right.
Right. And if it's simple, they're going to stay and book an appointment. And so, it's all very well and nice of us to scoff about, that user didn't know how to use our homepage. And we can be haughty and scoff about it, but then we just didn't get that appointment, right? It's our job to get people to book appointments. Mm-hmm. And so, right, there's no room for being haughty about that. Like we need to make it accessible to everybody.
Yeah, as a side note, the best, just to choose something that people are also often afraid of, learning languages, the best language teacher, or one of the best language teachers I've ever encountered, his name is Michelle Thomas, amazing guy. If you can get the original recordings of the classes that he did, they're just amazing. And what he would say to the students right off the bat was, don't worry, don't be nervous, don't try hard, because if you don't learn, it's my fault, not yours. It's the job of the teacher to make sure that you learn. So he sort of took the exact same approach with language learning and unburdened the student to make it the responsibility of the teacher to make it easy, which is, I think, partially why he was so spectacularly successful. So it just goes to show. And he could get people up to basic speaking in all the Romance languages in about 8 hours of class time. It's really amazing. So what other books outside of Don't Make Me Think do you give most as a gift or recommend most?
And then, How to Measure Anything, which is what we talked about before, which is about, being outcome based and being, getting these measurable outcomes, saying I'm going to lose 10 pounds as opposed to just saying, I'm going to try to lose weight, and this is a great book because, people often complain, that they can't measure something, right? Like, mm-hmm. How many people like our site? Like, do people really like our website? Well, how do you measure that? Well, it's measurable, right? You can do a survey, you can ask people, you can just look at conversion rates. How many people actually do something on your website as opposed to just look at it and run away? And so this book is I found is quite informative onto how to think about measuring things that you might have thought were intangible historically. And it also goes into these kind of ideas about why it's valuable to measure something. So going back to what I was saying about, if there's a 10% chance of something failing, well, then you should spend 10% of your time, before doing it, deciding if it's going to fail or not. And so really getting that discipline about doing enough forethought and sort of reflection up front, is another big sort of theme of this book.
I thought the confidence interval aspect was really fascinating as well. Not something that I've thought enough about. And it's just, if you're 90% confident that something is going to happen or that something is correct, what does that actually mean? People throw that around. Like, how certain are you? I'm 75% certain. Like, how should that be reflected in your actions and preparation and so on? Right.
Right.
I thought it was really, really fascinating. Do you have what is your favorite documentary or movie or favorites? And these don't have to be highbrow. It could be Legally Blonde.
Oh, I don't know. I really like Forrest Gump a lot. I don't know if that's like a common one or a cheesy one.
What do you like about it?
Well, it's just like, in the beginning, I mean, it's sort of obvious symbolism, but in the beginning, there's like a feather floating around. At the end, there's a feather floating around, and he's sort of, he kind of floats around, right? Like I forgot the exact story, but I think he's running. Oh, I know. There's a football field and he kind of runs through it because he's fleeing from something. Yeah. And he runs faster than everybody. So then they kind of oh my God, we got to get that guy to play football. And then he plays football, and then he goes to college because he plays football. At the end of college, some army recruiter just hands him a flyer just at random and says you should join the army. And he's like, okay, I'll join the army. And so he's just kind of floating around on the wind there. And I think it's a good sort of lesson where you don't take yourself too seriously, right? Like it's like you're going to just like things are going to happen, and the more you stress out about like life is not going exactly the way I planned, the more unhappy you're going to make yourself. Which is not to say you shouldn't try to do things, but you should certainly try to shape your life and all this, but don't take it too seriously, or don't stress out too much when things don't go exactly how you planned.
So I would love to hear maybe a concrete example from your life, because from all outward indications, I mean, you've done exceptionally well with ZocDoc and elsewhere. How do you choose how much to plan versus sort of allow to bend to serendipity? Right? Because you do a bunch of other things that we haven't gotten into yet, but the music, you take very, very seriously.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about ping pong now that you mentioned Forrest Gump, but let's use ping pong as an example. Let's tell, well, maybe you can explain the ping pong, the ping pong phenomenon, your experience with ping pong. And just
sure. This goes back to what you were saying about, older people wanting to learn something. I play guitar and people say, well, I wish I had started guitar when I was a kid so I could play. And I say, well, I started it when I was 28. And so, still young, but not, I wasn't like a 10-year-old. And ping pong, I learned when I was 36, and I'm 38 now. And I thought that would be, it's another interesting thing. It's really, I think people limit themselves as to, they think they can learn, or it's almost like an excuse to not have to try to learn something, right?
Right.
Oh, I'm 36. Like I can't learn ping pong now. I'm too old. And it kind of makes it easy to say, it's easy to not try to double down and actually learn something, because you can just kind of cast it off and say, oh, I'm too old to learn new things.
Right.
But the story of the ping pong was that we got, we purchased 2 or 3 ping pong tables for my office 2 years ago, and I was the worst player. I had never played ping pong in my life. I'd played like 5 times in my whole life, and I was the worst player out of everybody, and everybody was laughing, and they were like, ha ha ha, because it's always fun to screw with the boss, right? So right, so the boss sucks at ping pong, ha ha, we're all beating the boss at ping pong. And so I got motivated. Let's say I got motivated. Right?
That's a good adjective.
and I threw down the gauntlet, and I said, okay, I'm going to beat everybody here. I'm going to beat everybody at this company in 30 days. And everyone was like, you can't just...
Okay, so you proclaimed this. This was like...
I proclaimed it out loud. And I photoshopped like the Highland, the Highland. There's a Highlander. I don't know if you remember that movie, The Highlander.
There can be only one.
So there's a sword. There's a photo of him with the sword in the air, and the lightning is striking the sword. And I replaced the sword with a ping pong paddle, and the lightning is striking the ping pong paddle. And I wrote, "There could be only one." And I practiced and practiced, and in 30 days, I had beaten all but 2 people at the company, and because this is like the long tail of right, like at the end of the bell curve, there's going to be people that are exceptionally good, but and getting mathy again, I know,
right.
But
no, it's just like, I mean, it's like Facebook and Peter Thiel's portfolio, right? There's just sort of like a power law.
Exactly.
Like the last 2 people are going to be monsters.
Yeah. And so, but then in another 30 days, I beat those 2 people, and I said in 30 days I'll beat everybody, but in 60 days, I beat everybody but 2 people in 30 days, and then 60 days I beat everybody.
How did you go about learning it? Like when you sat down, you're like, okay, now I run the risk of humiliating myself if I don't make this happen.
Yeah.
What was when you sat down to like plan it out, how did you do it?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't think that's an interesting sort of way to put it. It never occurred to me to say like, oh, I'm humiliating myself if I didn't do this. And maybe that's like a sort of mentality that's maybe that's like illustrative of the mentality, right? I wasn't it until you said that now, like 2 years later, it never crossed my mind that like the humiliation of defeat, or how humiliating that would be. And so maybe it's just it's more constructive to just think about, like, to focus on the positive of when you're going to win, and not like and not fret about the downside.
So when you were fantasizing about gloating over the employees in the company,
yes, yeah.
how did you sit down to plan it out, or what? Okay,
so
what was the method? Because I actually want to get good at ping pong. So
Sure. So the first thing was, and by far the most important thing was, I went to the ping pong parlor by my house and took lessons.
Yeah, right.
And so and then when I at the end when so I was taking lessons once a week from there, and and that of course just catapulted me in my skill level. But what would happen was in the third or fourth week, one of my coworkers came into that ping pong parlor and saw me taking lessons, and spilled to the entire company that I had been taking lessons, and which I thought was another interesting sort of reflection on life, which is people are like, oh, you didn't say you were going to do that thing, right? And I was like, I didn't say what I was going to do or what I wasn't going to do. It's just
other than beat all your asses.
Yeah, I said I was going to beat everybody. And when we started ZocDoc, people said the same thing, right? People said, oh, you'll never get there's practice management software that exists out there, and they said you'll never be able to integrate to these third-party practice management systems because they're too antiquated, and they're not going to release a new version, and some of the companies are they're not even developing those things anymore. And we went and we just went and reverse engineered some of the existing ones just by literally like getting copies of the software and deconstructing the file structure and really reverse engineering it. And we got it working, and all of a sudden ZocDoc started working. All these antiquated softwares were effectively communicating with us. And then those naysayers were like, oh, you didn't say you were going to do that, right? Like, we thought you had to strike up partnerships with all these like software companies. You didn't say you were just going to get the software and reverse engineer it. And it's like, well, I didn't say I was or I wasn't, but it's like, if you're thinking so inside the box, and then when somebody thinks outside the box and gets something done, you should learn from it. You should be like, oh, that's slick. You shouldn't be like, oh, you didn't say you were going to do that. That's not fair, right? It's not, and that's another sort of illustration of, like, I'd say, positive attitudes versus negative attitudes. Well, but so I took these lessons. So I took these ping pong lessons, and then they go, oh, you didn't say you're going to do that, and then they started saying, oh, only you can afford lessons. The guy that came and found me in the ping pong place was like, he ran into me at the bar there's a bar in this ping pong parlor. And he said, yeah, not everyone can afford the lessons. And I was like, how much did you spend on these drinks? And he had bought a round of drinks for 4 or 5 of his friends. And he was like, this is $40. And I was like, the ping pong lesson I just took is $35. and I'm not drinking. I haven't bought any drinks. So I'm going to come out of this ping pong, place spending less than you have. But, so the first thing I did was that, and started with proper form, and then practiced a lot when people weren't around.
How did you practice when people weren't around?
So there's a couple.
I'm just gonna cheat here, I guess. What are some of the most common mistakes that people make playing ping pong? Just like the randos who like have a couple of beers and grab a ping pong table. Like, when you watch it, what makes you cringe? What are you like? If they only knew the basics, they should do this and not do that. Yeah.
Number one is the grip. So a lot of people just hold it atrociously. Just hold the ping pong paddle in whatever way they were first inclined to do it. And the general way, there's a couple like schools of holding it, but the general way you're supposed to do it is it's called the handshake. And so you sort of extend your hand like you're having a handshake. You're about to shake somebody's hand, and then you put the handle in that way. Sort of hard to explain.
I think I get it. So your 4 fingers, not your thumb, then are extended kind of diagonally across the back, the flat portion, as opposed to the handle of one of the paddles. Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to cover a large portion of the paddle with your hand, because then your backhand it'll hit your fingers.
Right.
But yeah, that's essentially the right idea.
Okay, people can Google it though. The handshake.
Yeah, handshake method, and the handshake grip, and then the other thing is people just don't have any conception of how big a role spin is in the game. And so it's a very light ball, and spin has immense effect on the ball. And so your normal like looping forehand is supposed to have a lot of top spin on it. And so every ball should have spin on it. And, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to slice it, if you're trying to side spin, if you're trying to top spin, if you're just hitting it flat, then you're sort of forsaking an opportunity to do something, tricky with it that would screw up your opponent. And so, learning how to hit the ball with spin is I'd say the second biggest thing.
Cool. What do you have any morning or evening rituals? Like, what does the first hour of your day look like?
That's an interesting question. I suppose I don't really have any rituals. I just get up and get ready and go to work. I think that
you do brush your teeth though every morning.
I do brush my teeth as long on the days I remember I brush my teeth. I think that I'm very fortunate in that every day has a different set of challenges, and I kind of have the whole company is part of the stuff that I'm concerned with.
So let me rephrase then, because I'm gonna push a little. I bet you do have patterns, at least, whether it's weekly or daily, and I'm just curious what of those patterns contribute to your sort of effectiveness or just output, or lower your stress, right? I mean, so music is part of your life, but are there things you do, say, on a weekly basis, like one day a week or twice a week or whatever it might be, that you think allow you to be a high functioning person without your sort of having to be put in a mental institution every once in a while to de-stress?
Yeah, certainly. I guess I've never really thought about it in those terms. I don't.
I'm such a negative person.
Like
I'm not.
No, it's like an illustration maybe that I'm not maybe not self-aware that like today I need to today I should do something to de-stress because my stress levels are high, and certainly I do get there are certainly days when the stress levels are high, and I don't think I am self-aware enough to have okay, today I should meditate or whatever. But I certainly read a lot. I think I try to rid myself of cognitive biases. Yeah. It's something that is extremely nerdy thing to say.
Could you explain to people, for those people who may not be familiar, what that means?
Yeah, sure. So,
or give an example. Either way.
Yeah. So there's a huge slew of what a psychologist would call cognitive biases that humans have, and what they are things that make a human. For whatever reason, evolutionary reason, it makes them averse to something that they shouldn't be averse to, or irrationally evaluate things. And so I'll give you an example. We can go back to gambling again. Mm-hmm. Let's use the same example. So if it was $10, if we rolled a die and each time it was 1 through 5, you lost $1, and if it was 6, you won $10, then you would play that game. Mm-hmm. Right, because over time you would be positive. But if each time,
assuming I have the bankroll, yeah, correct.
Yeah, assuming you have the bankroll. But let's say each time that you rolled that die, instead of each roll losing $1, 1 through 5 losing $1 and 6 gaining $10. Let's say that each of 1 through 5 you lost $10,000, mm-hmm. and then with a 6 you won $100,000. Mm-hmm. Now would you play that game? So it turns out that most people wouldn't play that game, even though the numbers are the same, mm-hmm. Because the fear of losing that much money is sort of insurmountable. Mm-hmm. And so people have these, even though you should play that game, right? And a large business would play that game, mm-hmm. and even a rational actor would play that game. And so people have, so that's a cognitive bias called loss aversion, right? Like losing $100, you feel more bad for losing $100 than you feel good when you win $100.
Right. Yeah. The sunken cost fallacy, a close cousin, right? So you have people who will hold on to an investment just because they have, it's gone down a certain amount.
Yeah. My favorite story of sunk cost is there's this tennis club where you can rent, where the outdoor courts are free, but the indoor courts you have to rent, and you have to rent them ahead of time. You have to rent them 3 weeks ahead of time, and you have to pay $50 for the court for an hour or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is a real case. I forgot where it was, but in like March or April, you'll and the outdoor courts are generally considered to be far more pleasurable because you're outside and it's warm and whatever, sunny. And the indoor courts are, these uncomfortable like white lights or whatever. Yeah. And so what happens is in April it'll be a beautiful sunny day, and the people will be playing on the indoor courts and the outdoor courts are empty. And you say, well, why are you playing on the indoor court? You should go play outside. And they're like, well, we've already paid for the indoor court, right? Like we paid for it last week. So now we're going to go to the indoor court and we're going to play. And you're like, but the outdoor court is far nicer and it's empty. Why don't you go play there? Mm-hmm. Right? And they go, well, no, because we've paid for this one. Right. And so it's a sunk cost fallacy, right? And this is a cognitive bias, right? You should do the thing that is most like, you should play tennis on the most pleasurable court then. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you paid $50 a week ago for the less pleasurable court. If the nicer court is open right now, you should play on the nicer court. So
I should mention for folks, as imperfect as Wikipedia might be, if you search list of cognitive biases, don't search cognitive bias, search list of cognitive biases. There's a long list of these types of cognitive biases. And there are also a lot of books that explore this, like Think Twice. But there's sort of two approaches here, right? So, or two ways that you can, minimize the damage of cognitive biases or extract value from them, right? The first is correcting those cognitive biases or at least becoming aware of them. The second is harnessing your inherent cognitive biases for something positive, right? So for instance, there are, cases where, experiments have been done with, say, gym memberships. And so having someone pay on a monthly basis for a gym membership is not nearly as effective as, say, having them overpay in advance and then giving them a refund of X amount for each Y number of times they go to the gym. And sort of harnessing that type of prepayment and loss aversion and sunken cost, to incentivize somebody to do something positive they wouldn't otherwise do. So it's, anyway, this is also something that I like to nerd out about. So
yeah.
What's a cognitive bias that you overcame or something that you're currently working on? Anything in particular?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think all of these things were things that, all these things are things that are very innate in everybody. And so I think, I at some point I did have sunk cost fallacy. At some point I did have, loss aversion and these kind of things. Let me see what's a big one that I think another big one that everyone has is anchoring. And I certainly had that before, which is, in a negotiation when it's not clear, like what the price for something should be, you should just throw out a huge number. Like what you said, you wanted me to be your mentor, right? Your math mentor, right? And so what should an hourly rate be between you and me? I have no idea. I've never taught, for a living. And, so we'd have no idea, you and I. So in that silent moment when you and I are like, what do you think the price should be? I'm going to blurt out $1,000 an hour. That's what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not because I think I deserve that. It's because now I've anchored the conversation. Saying a huge number like that, mm-hmm. Has like blown away your, it's destroyed like your brain. I've just destroyed your brain, Tim Ferriss.
It's not hard.
And so right. And so now when we settle on a final number, it's going to be much higher than it would have been otherwise. Mm-hmm. And that's just a cognitive bias. And now, like you said, you use these to your advantage. This is a situation in which I can use that to my advantage. So right, the final,
especially because I suck at math on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So right, whereas the final, if I hadn't done that, the final price might have been $25 an hour. And since I threw out that huge number, it's like screwed up your brain now. And the final price is instead going to be $40 an hour, because I've done this anchoring thing. And so that's a great one, for all you listeners out there. If you're about to go into a negotiation, go try this out. It only works when there's not a preset sort of
reference point.
Reference point, right? Like if you're like, how much I'm going to sell you my used Toyota, right? And how much should it be? And a ballpark should be $5,000. I can't be like $100,000, right? It just sounds stupid, and like rude, right? To be so it only works really when there's not a good expectation from either party.
That is a good point, though. That negotiating is a fantastic way. That's probably the most systematic way that I've tried to address my own self-defeating instincts. Would be another way to look at biases, right? So the Secrets of Power Negotiating is a great book. The audio is even better. Getting Past No, I think, is a fantastic book. Better than Getting to Yes. Do you have any? Have you read any particular books on negotiating? Or
actually, yeah, the first book that came to mind for me was Getting to Yes. So I haven't
Getting to Yes. Okay,
no, but I love Getting to Yes, and I love, you know, a lot of important things that people misunderstand. And I've just furthered that with the example I just said, was that not all negotiation is a zero-sum game.
Yep.
I think Getting to Yes is a great exposition of that.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's I think you'd enjoy Getting Past No. It was actually written after Getting to Yes by one of the co-authors of Getting to Yes. When you think of the word successful or hear the word successful, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
I think I'd say Bill Gates. Maybe that's a cliche, like sort of obvious answer, but you know,
depends on the reasons you give, I guess.
Yeah, he's in tech, right? He is / was a computer nerd. I'm a computer nerd. You know, he built an immense and, you know, one of the greatest software companies, greatest technology companies ever, and something that I aspire to do. And then not only that, but then, sort of the second chapter of his life, he's now gone and done all this great philanthropy. And it's something that, I would love to follow in his footsteps on that when, retirement time comes for me, is to go and give back and do these philanthropic efforts.
If you were to follow Bill Gates' path, in a lot of those respects that you just mentioned, what are the things about Bill Gates that, if you could opt out of emulating, you would opt out of emulating?
I don't know. I guess, it is a tough one. I guess you could see, like, I guess he was very rough on his own employees in, within Microsoft. And I think that, at a younger age, I was also very, very abrupt and sort of, fit to like, susceptible to like bouts of, anger and whatever. And I think I've come a long way at this company to be a lot nicer and as like I had a couple startups when, in my 20s, and I think I was very sort of mercurial in those startups. But by the time I had started ZocDoc, I had sort of ironed all that out, and it's much better to be a nice person when you're managing.
I like mercurial. That's a good adjective. It makes me think of a comedian named Jim Gaffigan. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but yeah. He said, yeah, I wish I were. I think he said at some point, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, yeah, if you're a Latin guy or woman and you're really angry, people say, wow, it's just that Latin temper. And he's like, but if I behave that way, people just say, wow, that guy's a dick. But mercurial, I like that choice.
It's just my Indian passion coming through.
Yeah, Indian passion. Right, exactly. I don't know what to, yeah, I can't pull off Scandinavian passion. Doesn't usually get accepted. So on the flip side, what's the first face that comes to mind when you think punchable?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know. I can't. I don't know.
Come on. It doesn't have to be a real person. I'll give you an out. I
don't know. Maybe the Jersey Shore people, right? Or the sort of people that are, famous for being famous.
Yeah.
Like not the people that are, have actually contributed,
built stuff.
Yeah, and built stuff. Yeah.
What are the most frequently played albums or artists on your iPhone or computer?
I love the Beatles a lot. And I think that the more I listen to them, the more complexity and sort of stuff you discover as you listen to their stuff over and over, which is great, right? A lot of pop songs are just really simple, and the first time you hear it, you've heard everything there is to hear. But and the Beatles' early stuff was like that. Like, it was really simple and kind of about like chasing girls and stuff. And then later on, they got really, really sophisticated and there's a lot of lovely complexity to the music. And as you know, I'm a big, I play music myself, and I understand quite a bit about music theory, which is, again, getting sort of mathematical, but really understanding why things sound good and why this chord sounds great here and this kind of stuff is all, once again, math, and not complicated math, simple math, but I love music theory, and those guys were the kings of that.
What would be 2 or 3 tracks that you would suggest people listen to explore that?
Let me see. If you find, let me think. I like Across the Universe a lot. So if you find like you can even see like once you understand music theory, you can even see like which ones were written by whom, and so you can see Paul McCartney always plays this. He always puts the 4 minor in his songs, and that's sort of a music theory term, but he's a big fan of putting the 4 minor in his writing, and so you can, when you hear a 4 minor come up, you're like, oh, I bet this one was written by McCartney, and then you go look.
Interesting.
Right? And so I like Across the Universe, which does have a 4 minor in it. I like Something. That one's I think it's by George Harrison. And let me see, what are some other good ones? Certainly like the more psychedelic ones, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is great. I Am the Walrus is great. And yeah, there's really no end to the
to the list.
Yeah.
If you had 1,000 people, non-musicians, people who listen to music but have never played an instrument, and you wanted to get them hooked on learning more about music and potentially playing music, what would you have them read, watch, listen, buy, whether it's an instrument or otherwise? I mean, you are in large part responsible for getting me interested in hand drumming, right? But I'm not sure if that's the best gateway drug for people with music. But what would you have them listen to or buy or play with or do if you had 1,000 people and you had like $1 million on the line? I'm not sure what the minimal threshold is for you to to make it. Not
I would do a business case and say I can train this many people. No, I think that probably the guitar is the easiest because
interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. Why?
Yeah, because I think, well, for a couple reasons. It's probably not the easiest to play in terms of like, I mean, it's kind of hard to hold a chord, and obviously with a piano you can just plunk the keys. But the second you get over the hump of learning 3 or 4 chords on guitar, you're off to the races, right? Because you can play so many pop songs with just 3 or 4 chords on guitar. And so within a few weeks, you can already start playing, simple songs. And then like Twist and Shout, for example, to go back to the Beatles, is just 3 chords, 3 easy chords. And so you can play Twist and Shout in a week or 2 really well. And then what you do is, as you learn each new song, pick a song with 1 extra chord in it, right? So this next song has the same 3 chords as Twist and Shout, but 1 minor chord in it. And so now you're learning that new song, you're leveraging, right? 75% you already know because it's the other 3 chords, and you're only picking up 1 new chord. And so then as you play, as you pick new songs, just add 1 new chord each time, and your repertoire grows of songs, and the repertoire of chords, also grows, and it makes, right. And so it's really easy to get into that groove where it's fun to play because you're playing songs that everybody likes, and it doesn't feel like, work or rehearsal or practice. It's just, each one, I just have to practice 1 new chord. And over time, over the course of a year, you'll learn a ton of songs.
Now, just as a couple of resources for folks potentially, one is just Googling Axis of Awesome, who I don't know if you've seen this, does an amazing example of showing with 3 or 4 chords how you can play almost every pop song you've ever heard.
Yeah, that chord progression is called 1-5-6-4. Well,
there you go. People could just Google that. So chord progression 1-5-6-4.
That's in the music theory notation. It'd be 1-5-6-4, and they play like 100 different songs, and it's really hilarious.
Yeah, they're amazing. Are there any, for someone to add one chord at a time without having to manually figure it out themselves and kind of reinvent the wheel. Is there any particular approach that you would suggest in doing that? Any way that you would Google for that to figure it out, or YouTube approach, or teachers? I mean,
yeah, there's a extreme wealth of online online diagrams and YouTube videos about how to do these things. So, what
would you search for to whittle it down? I think it's a paradox of choice challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know really. I guess it's not like for the basic chords. It's really like anything will do. For example, a D major chord is just it's three of your fingers, your index, middle, and fourth finger, and then you have to put them on the bottom three strings of the guitar on the second fret, third fret, and second fret. And so you just have to, it's just that, right? It's not more complicated than that. There's no like specific, form that you have to do when you approach the guitar or whatever. You just got to slam your three fingers down on those three frets, on those three strings, and you'll play a D chord. And so at that level, you just need to know which fingers to put on which strings where, and it's not an intense sort of, form exercise or anything.
Cool. All right. Last question for now in this installment. If you could give your 20-year-old self advice at this point in retrospect, what would it be? And it doesn't have to be one thing.
Oh man.
Or just 20-year-olds in general. Could be you, yourself, but it could be in general.
Sure. I mean, I guess it would go back to these. So I'd say certainly, when you're young, do the entrepreneurial things, because those are the things that will get you, right. You'll learn the most by far. And so I did, like I said, I did 2 startups in my 20s, and they were, neither one was a great hit. But the amount I learned in, 1 year of doing a startup was like 7 years of working at a big company. And so, when you're young and, you just finished college or whatever, and you've got this, you've got this freedom, and you're not encumbered with, with a spouse and kids that you have to pay for, and you can live on ramen noodles and all this stuff. That's the time to go and take this entrepreneurial risk, because even if everything you do is a complete flop, if you spend 5 years doing it, you will have learned like 35 years worth of career progression and life skills in those 5 years of just risking and failing and risking and failing. So even if it's a total flop, the person that you come out at the end of it is far ahead of if you just gone and worked at a big company.
So on that point, I lied about the last question. This is one more for people who are graduating now or considering a shift, a career change. I'm not sure if this is age dependent, but let's just say for the sake of argument that they're single or they just have a very low burn rate. How would you suggest people choose their first gig or their next gig? I know it's a highly personal thing, but let's just say people graduating college in the near future for the sake of simplicity.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like figure out a market need, like anything that you have in your day-to-day world. That sucks. Like, what is it hard to find parking, or can is a movie theater dirty or whatever, and just try to solve that problem. I think that's a great way to get started, and you'll learn a lot. You'll do something, you'll create a website where like it shows you like which movie theaters are dirty, and you'll realize, wow, I can't, like, there's no revenue from this website. Like I can't make any money telling people what movie theaters are dirty. But then that's a learning by itself, right? And you come away from that and you're like, okay, I need to think about, things with actual revenue opportunities. And you'll do that iterative process, and you'll flop a bunch, but that's fine. Like that's the learning process, and it's the school of hard knocks. And you're going to learn a ton just doing that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, Nick, I think this is a great place to stop for now. I'm sure we'll have a round 2 in person with some food and some wine. But
that's great. It was a lot of fun.
Where can people learn more about you or ZocDoc? Where would you like people to check what you're up to out? Certainly,
I'm on the About Us page of ZocDoc, so but more importantly, if you need a doctor, it really is the best place to find a doctor. So ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com. For myself, I don't have any, I don't have any about, I don't have a shrine to me on the web anywhere. So I've got a LinkedIn page. You can find me on the LinkedIn page, I suppose. But ZocDoc is my pride and joy. So go there.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to cut my teeth on some ping pong. And we may have to have a showdown next time we get together, balls of fury style. Awesome, man. Well, thanks very much, and I will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode of The Tim Ferriss Show is brought to you by 99 Designs and Ex Officio. 99 Designs is the world's largest online marketplace of graphic designers. And I have used 99 Designs for years, including to get cover concepts for the 4 Hour Body, which went on to become #1 New York Times, #1 Wall Street Journal. It was a huge hit. And here's how it works. And you can check everything out, including some of my competitions. You can see these book covers and so on at 99designs.com/Tim. Whether you need a logo, a car wrap, a web design, an app, a thumbnail, a t-shirt, whatever, you go to 99designs.com. You describe your project, and then within a week or less, you have tons of designers around the world who compete for your business and submit different ideas and designs and drafts. You have an original design that you love, or you pay nothing. It is fantastic. I have used it. I have mentioned it before, including in the 4-Hour Workweek as a resource. Check it out, 99designs.com/Tim. And if you use that link, you'll be able to see what I've done on the platform. You will also get $99 as an upgrade for free, which will get you more designs, more submissions. So check it out. Ex Officio, boy, where do I begin? I have a long history with Ex Officio. Ex Officio makes clothing. And as far back as 2007, 2008, I had a hit video that went viral called How to Travel the World with 10 Pounds or Less. And I talked about Ex Officio underwear. Ex Officio underwear is lightweight, ultra lightweight, quick drying, and antimicrobial. Why is this important? Well, I've gone through 20 plus countries with 2 pairs of underwear before, both from Ex Officio. And I'm not alone in this. This might sound crazy, but a lot of executives, for instance, will take this underwear, they'll wash it in the sink or somewhere else, roll it up in a towel like a burrito, step on it, and a few hours later, they are completely dry, completely clean. You don't have to just have 2, and yes, they have to be comfortable for all-day wear. But check out their clothing, as well as their underwear. You can go to exofficio.com/Tim. That's exofficio.com/Tim, and you can see this video, which has a bunch of other packing tips. But this underwear, this clothing is not just for the gents. Ladies, you have choices too. And they really have an incredible collection of high-quality products that I've used for almost 10 years now. So check them out, exofficio.com/Tim. And until next time, thank you for listening.